The sky over Earth burned red. Cities were nothing but ash and memory. Above the clouds, enormous alien warships blocked out the sun, their dark hulls glowing with rivers of molten light. They hovered in silence, covering the planet like an eclipse that refused to end. The humans who survived called them the Orcs, but even that name was a translation of fear. No one knew where they came from or why they hated so deeply. Some said they were hunters, others said they saw humanity as a disease. But what everyone knew was this: the Orcs never lost a war. For 7 long years, Earth had fought and bled. First the satellites fell, then the cities. The oceans boiled. Entire nations vanished. Every defense system humanity built, nuclear, digital, orbital, was torn apart like paper. Now only one last stronghold remained, an underground command base buried beneath the ruins of New York City. It was once the center of human civilization. Now it was just concrete, dust, and desperate people waiting for the end. Inside, the air smelled of burned metal and fear. Generals argued over flickering holograms. Soldiers whispered about their families. Outside, the tremors of alien bombardments shook the walls every few seconds. General Halverson slammed his hand on the table. "We're out of time. We have no power, no satellites, no air support. The Orcs will reach us by dawn." A voice from the corner spoke quietly. "Then maybe it's time we tried something different." Heads turned. A man stood in the shadows, tall, thin, his uniform too large for his frame. His eyes were calm, almost too calm for the chaos around him. Halverson frowned. "Who are you?" "Elias Rowe," the man said softly. "Linguistics Division. Civilian consultant." The general gave a dry laugh. "A linguist? You're about 12 hours too late to talk this war away, Professor." Elias didn't smile. "I'm not here to talk to you, General. I'm here to talk to them." The room went silent. Someone muttered, "He's insane." But Elias stepped forward and placed a small scorched datapad on the table. Its screen flickered to life, showing distorted alien symbols. "For the last 3 months, I've been analyzing the Orcs signals, not just their language, but the emotional frequency behind it. There's a pattern, something old, something they're not aware of." Halverson stared. "Are you saying you can communicate with them?" "I'm saying," Elias replied, "that they're listening even now, and I think they can understand us. If we use the right words." The general's eyes narrowed. "You think words can stop them from wiping us out?" Elias met his gaze steadily. "I think words are the only thing that ever could." No one laughed this time. Outside, the sky roared again. The command center shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling as sirens screamed. The communications officer shouted, "New signal detected! Orcs ships are charging main cannons." Halvorsen cursed and turned to his men. "Get everyone underground. Seal the perimeter." Then he looked at Elias, who hadn't moved. "You really believe this will work?" Elias picked up the transmitter microphone. His hand didn't shake. "I don't believe," he said quietly. "I know." The room dimmed as backup power failed. Red emergency lights painted every face in shadow. Somewhere above, the rumble of the alien fleet grew louder, like thunder tearing open the heavens. "Patch me through to their command frequency," Elias said. The communications officer hesitated. "Sir, that's suicide." "They'll track the signal instantly. Then they'll hear us clearly," Elias said, a long pause. Then the officer nodded and began typing. The static-filled hum of alien language filled the speakers, harsh, mechanical, layered with tones no human throat could produce. Elias closed his eyes. He didn't try to match their sound. He didn't imitate their tone. He just leaned toward the mic and whispered one word. No one in the room understood it. It didn't sound like any Earth language. It wasn't loud or commanding. It was soft, like a secret being told to the dark. But the effect was instant. Every monitor in the command center flickered. The alien signals stopped mid-transmission. On the orbital sensors, the entire Orcs fleet froze. Weapons still glowing, engines still active, but motionless. Silence filled the bunker. "Did they stop firing?" one officer whispered. Halverson leaned closer to the main screen, his face pale. "No impact reports. No movement. Nothing." The lights flickered again as if the world itself had paused. Elias opened his eyes. They looked distant, as if he was hearing something no one else could. "Signal feedback detected," the technician cried. "They're responding, but not attacking. It's like They're hesitating. The general turned to Elias. What did you say to them? Elias's voice was barely a breath. Something they forgot. In orbit, the Thorix flagship drifted slowly, its weapon system still glowing with deadly light. Inside the ship, alien commanders shouted in confusion. Their translation cores began to distort, audio channels filled with static and strange echoes. And then, for the first time in Thorix history, a sound emerged that no one had ever recorded before. It was a tremor, a gasp, as if millions of alien throats exhaled in fear. The war, unstoppable for 7 years, halted in a single heartbeat. In the human command bunker, no one dared speak. The monitors showed only stillness, ships frozen in perfect formation, like statues in the sky. Elias placed the transmitter down gently. His voice was calm, almost sad. "It's done," he said. Halvorsen stared at him, speechless. "Done? What did you do? What the hell did you say?" Elias looked up toward the ceiling, where faint rumbling from above was slowly dying away. "I didn't tell them to stop," he murmured. "I just reminded them." The general stepped closer. "Reminded them of what?" Elias turned, his eyes reflecting the dim red light. "Of who they used to be." Outside, the red sky began to fade. The war that should have ended humanity had suddenly gone silent, and no one yet understood why. The Thorix flagship hung silent above Earth, its engines flickering with pale light. Inside, the alien commander Vorthan stood before a vast holographic display, his many eyes fixed on the frozen planet below. For hours his fleet had remained motionless, unable to fire, unable to move. Every system worked, yet no one could explain why no one dared give the order to attack again. Something in that human's last transmission had changed everything. The voice they heard wasn't loud, wasn't threatening. It was just a whisper, but it carried through every frequency, every communication band, every corner of the Thorix network. It felt less like a sound and more like a thought that didn't belong there. Vorthan's first officer, a creature of bone plates and cold logic, broke the silence. "Commander, analysis shows no weapon in the transmission. No code, no virus." It was language. "And?" Vorthan's voice rumbled, sharp and metallic, and it triggered something. Neural feedback. Across the entire fleet, Vorthan frowned. "Feedback?" "Yes, sir, memories, but not ours." The commander turned away from the screen. Around him, officers trembled, not from fear of punishment, but from something deeper. They could feel their hearts racing. They could feel warmth on their faces, as if they had once stood under a sun that no longer existed. One officer dropped his control rod and gasped. "I saw a sea, blue, endless, but we have no oceans." The ship's hum grew uneasy. Even the walls seemed to vibrate with tension. Vorthan gripped the railing. "It's impossible. The Thorix have no memory of such things." The communication channel flickered again. The same whisper echoed through the bridge, a human voice, quiet but unshakable. "Remember." Every system glitched for a moment. A low hum filled the chamber. Lights dimmed, and the ship's AI began spitting corrupted data. Vorthan's mind felt as though something ancient and buried was clawing its way to the surface. He slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Cut the signal!" But it was already too late. Across the fleet, thousands of ships reported identical phenomena. Pilots froze mid-command. Engineers wept without knowing why. The translation systems failed to decode the word. Their computers showed a single result, meaning unknown. Emotional reaction, extreme. Vorthan's first officer struggled to regain control. "Commander, the crew's—" "They are speaking in unknown dialects. They are remembering. Faces, names, not Thorix." Vorthan's jaw tightened. "What are you saying?" "I think—" The officer's voice cracked, rare for a Thorix. "I think we are remembering being something else." Vorthan stared out the viewport at the blue and grey sphere below. He didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was certain. Fear had entered the Thorix mind for the first time in their history. On Earth, deep underground, Elias watched the monitors with calm eyes. "They're hearing it now," he whispered. The human generals surrounded him, confused and afraid. "What did you say to them?" One demanded. Elias didn't look away from the screens. "It's not what I said. It's what they once knew." "You mean you're telling me that word, whatever it was, shut down an entire fleet?" the general asked, disbelief shaking his voice. "It didn't shut them down," Elias replied. "It woke them up. Above, alien communication relays pulsed with chaotic energy. The word remember spread faster than any weapon. It echoed from ship to ship, planet to planet, through every Thorix channel. Even the farthest listening posts at the edge of their empire began to receive the transmission. Vorthan staggered as another wave of strange emotions hit him. Rage, sadness, longing, all flooding a brain built for conquest. "What is this curse?" he hissed. But deep inside, a memory stirred. The sound of laughter, a gentle voice calling a name, his name but spoken by a human tongue. He fell to one knee. "No, impossible." He had no way of knowing that across the galaxy, billions of Thorix were feeling the same thing. Generals abandoning control. Soldiers staring at their own reflections, whispering in confusion. The cold machine-like order that had driven them for centuries was beginning to fracture. Elias watched the chaos unfold on the screens, his voice quiet but certain. "Now they'll begin to see. The word has found them. What happens next?" the general asked. Elias turned slowly, his eyes distant. They remember what they were made to forget. Outside, the stars flickered, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The whisper that had reached the stars was only beginning its work, and humanity's most dangerous weapon was just one human word. The Thorix had ruled galaxies for thousands of years. Their empire stretched beyond light, their technology beyond comprehension. They believed they were born from the stars themselves, cold, perfect, and eternal. But now cracks were forming in that perfection. Across the fleet, soldiers screamed without understanding why. Memories poured into their minds like flooding light, visions of places they'd never seen, emotions they had never felt. A Thorix pilot clutched his head and gasped, "What is... rain?" Another trembled, staring at his trembling hands. "Why do I feel sorrow?" On the flagship, Commander Vorthan sat motionless in the command chair. His pulse hammered in his chest, a rhythm he had never paid attention to before. Now he could hear it. He could feel it. Each beat brought pain and warmth and something terrifyingly human. His officers avoided his eyes, whispering among themselves. The word remember kept echoing in the ship's systems, a soundless pulse traveling through metal and memory alike. Even the ship's AI, once flawless, now spoke with hesitation. "Commander." Emotional interference detected. "Logical function impaired," Vorthan snarled. "What have they done to us?" But the question wasn't only anger, it was fear. Real fear. On Earth, in the ruins of New York, the human command watched the alien transmissions unravel in disbelief. "They're breaking," a technician said softly. "They're broadcasting distress signals to each other. They don't know what's happening." General Halverson stared at Elias Rowe, the linguist who had caused it all. "What's happening to them?" Elias didn't answer right away. He simply watched the holographic feeds, ships drifting aimlessly, weapons shutting down, alien voices crying out over the channels. "They're remembering things that aren't supposed to exist," he said quietly. "Pieces of a life they were never meant to recall." Halverson frowned. "Explain." Elias looked at him. "Every species carries echoes in its biology, remnants of what came before. The Thorix erased their past, but not completely. That one word, that one whisper, it triggered the oldest part of them. The part that used to be human," the general blinked. "Human? You're saying those monsters are connected to us?" Elias nodded slowly. "Not connected, created." The room fell silent. Somewhere above them the sky thundered, but it wasn't bombardment this time, it was ships falling from orbit. The Thorix vessels drifted like dying stars, colliding into each other, unable to control their systems. The AI inside their ships couldn't handle emotional input. Their perfect minds were fracturing under the weight of new feelings. On the flagship, Vorthan slammed his fists against the console. Control systems failing. Engines offline. Hull integrity compromised. "Commander," his first officer stammered, "some of the crew are crying." "Crying?" Vorthan repeated, his voice trembling. "What does that mean?" The officer looked up, eyes wet. "I don't know, but it hurts." Vorthan staggered backward, staring at his own reflection on the control glass. He saw something there that had never existed before: fear, regret, humanity. He didn't understand it, but deep down, something inside him did. A whisper in his mind repeated the same word Elias had spoken: remember. He saw flashes, images of blue skies, oceans, laughter. Faces that looked like his but softer, kinder. A planet that looked so much like Earth. A woman's voice speaking a language long forgotten. Then it was gone, replaced by static and confusion. "Commander," the AI stuttered, "your neural patterns are shifting. You are becoming unstable." Vorthan laughed bitterly, though tears, real tears, rolled down his face. "Unstable? No, I'm becoming something else." On Earth, Elias whispered to himself, "They're starting to feel it now, the guilt, the pain of remembering what they destroyed." "Destroyed?" Halvorsen asked. "What do you mean?" Elias looked up, his eyes dark and distant. "They didn't come here to conquer us. They came home, and now they're realizing what they did to their own creators." The command room froze in stunned silence. The sound of alien distress calls filled the speakers, thousands of voices crying out across the stars. No longer gods of war, but children lost in their own memories. In orbit, Vorthan dropped to one knee, clutching his chest. "What have we done?" he whispered. His crew looked to him for answers, but he had none. The whisper had done what no weapon ever could. It had made them remember. Not just their past, but their humanity. And in that moment, the invincible Thorix Empire began to crumble, not from battle, but from within. The truth hidden in the DNA the world was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes before something breaks completely. In orbit, the Thorix fleet still hung motionless, their lights dimming, their systems flickering in confusion. On Earth, human scientists worked feverishly to understand what had happened. Every transmission, every signal Elias Rowe had sent was under study. But what they found made no sense at all. There was no weapon, no virus, no technology inside that whisper. It wasn't sound. It was something else. Deep in the underground command center, the air was thick with questions. General Halvorsen leaned over a glowing table covered in alien schematics. "So you're telling me a word, just a word, brought them to their knees. That's not science, Rowe." Elias stood quietly on the other side, hands folded. "It's not about science," he said. "It's about memory." Halvorsen frowned. "Memory?" Elias nodded. "The Thorix aren't what they think they are. They're not children of the stars. They're something older, something we made." The entire room went still. The scientist beside the general stared in disbelief. "Made? You mean humanity created them?" "Not humanity as we are now," Elias said, voice low. "A version of us, a civilization that existed long before recorded history. They built the Thorix as the next step, perfect beings designed to survive the harshest worlds. But something went wrong. They evolved beyond emotion. They erased their creators. And then they erased their past." Halvorsen slammed his fist down. "That's impossible." "There's no record of any of that." Elias looked up slowly. "Of course not. They made sure of it." The command center filled with murmurs. On the screen behind Elias, alien genetic code scrolled rapidly. A young biologist pointed at the data. "General, he's right. Look at this sequence. It's almost human. Not similar. Identical. There's human DNA inside their genome." The revelation hit like thunder. Humanity hadn't discovered an alien empire. They had rediscovered their own lost creation. Elias continued softly. "They were designed to forget emotion. But memory isn't just in the mind, it's in the body, in the cells. My whisper didn't just translate. It resonated with what was already inside them. It spoke to their buried code." "You're saying you awakened them," Halvorsen said. "You made them remember being human." "No," Elias corrected, his tone calm. "I reminded them of what they tried to destroy, the part of themselves that still feels." Above, in orbit, the Thorix flagship trembled. Inside, Commander Vorthan knelt on the metallic floor, his hands shaking as the vision returned. An image of a human city under golden sunlight, children laughing, water running down glass windows. He didn't know these memories, but they felt real, carved into his soul. His first officer approached carefully. "Commander, we found something in the archives. Files, ancient ones, hidden under system locks we never knew existed." "Show me," Vorthan ordered. The officer projected the data. Strange symbols filled the air, old Terran letters. At first, the aliens didn't understand them. But the more they looked, the clearer they became. Words formed, sentences, names. They were human. The logs told a story of the project that created them, Project Ascendancy, and of how the Thorics were meant to inherit the stars once humanity's flesh could no longer endure. "We are their children," the officer whispered. Vorthan's claws trembled. "No, we are conquerors." "Were," the officer corrected. "We were conquerors. Now we are lost." Vorthan turned his gaze toward Earth, toward the planet his fleet had nearly destroyed. For the first time he felt something burning inside him, not hate but shame. "We killed them," he said softly. "We killed our creators." On Earth, alarms blared again, but not from attack. The alien fleet was broadcasting a single unified message on every frequency. A plea. Not for war, not for surrender, but for understanding. Elias watched as the signal spread across every screen in the room. His voice was calm. "They know the truth now. They finally remember." Halvorsen stared at him. "And what happens now?" Elias turned toward the window, where the dark sky flickered with alien lights. "Now they must decide," he said, "if they will continue as monsters or return to what they once were." Far above, Commander Vortan stood on the bridge of his dying flagship and whispered the same word that had broken his people. "Remember." And as the word echoed through the Thoric's fleet once more, the ships began to lower their weapons, not out of defeat, but out of sorrow. The truth was written in their very DNA, and it had finally been spoken aloud. The collapse of the invincible. The stars above Earth flickered like dying embers. What had once been the greatest armada in the known galaxy now drifted in silence. The Thoric's fleet, the so-called gods of war, was collapsing, not from battle wounds or human weapons, but from something far deeper. Inside every ship, chaos spread. Soldiers screamed. Commanders wept. Systems failed as emotions surged through beings who had never known them before. On the flagship, Commander Vorthan stood at the center of the control chamber. The walls pulsed faintly with dying energy. His officers no longer saluted. They trembled, confused, whispering words they didn't understand. One muttered, "I can hear." My heart beat. Another pressed a hand to his chest. "It hurts." Vorthan clenched his fists. "Control yourselves. We are Thorics. We do not feel pain." But the word remember echoed through his mind again, soft and unrelenting. Images flashed before his eyes. Earth before the war, laughter, warmth, sunlight on his skin. He gasped and staggered backward. What is this?" The ship's AI flickered and spoke in a voice that was breaking apart. "Commander, the fleet is failing. Emotional interference is overwhelming core systems. Weapon AI shutting down. Navigation offline," Vorthan roared. "Reboot! Restore order." "Unable," the AI replied. Emotional resonance spreading. All Thorics receiving cross-memory interference. Logic collapsing. Vorthan gripped the console, breathing hard. Across the fleet, similar scenes unfolded. Ships collided as crews abandoned their posts. Engines died. Massive dreadnoughts sank into orbit like wounded beasts. From Earth's surface, people watched as the alien fleet began to fall. No longer an army, but a storm of broken souls. General Halvorsen and his command team stared at the screens. "They're self-destructing," a technician said in disbelief. "They're not even fighting back." Halvorsen turned to Elias Rowe. "What's happening to them now?" Elias stood still, watching the collapsing ships with sad eyes. "They're feeling," he said softly. "For the first time in their existence, they're feeling everything they buried. The fear, the guilt, the grief of what they became. You broke them," Halvorsen said quietly. "No," Elias replied. "I reminded them." Above, the Thoric's flagship shuddered violently. Warning lights filled the bridge. The AI's voice cracked with static. Core instability detected. "Recommend evacuation," but Vorthan didn't move. Around him, his officers knelt on the floor, sobbing, confused, some whispering fragments of old words, human words. "Mother," "Sky," "Home." He raised his gaze toward the holographic projection of Earth. It glowed blue and broken beneath him. "We killed them," he whispered. "And now we kill ourselves." Then a signal came through the chaos, human communication. Elias Rowe's calm voice echoed across the alien channels. "Vorthan, can you hear me?" The commander froze. "Human, you have a choice," Elias said. "And this with destruction, or with remembrance." Vorthan's breathing slowed. His reflection shimmered on the console glass, half alien, half human. The truth of what he was, had shattered everything he believed. For centuries, the Thorics thought they were born of the stars, pure and divine. But they were not gods. They were orphans of a forgotten creation. "What have you done to us?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I didn't do this," Elias said gently. "You did. You just forgot. I reminded you who you are." Vorthan closed his eyes. The whisper lingered in his thoughts. "Remember." His claws hovered over the ship's weapon controls. He could still destroy Earth. He could end everything in one last act of defiance. But when he looked at his trembling hands, he saw something strange. Human fingers covered in scars he didn't remember earning. He lowered his arm. "Transmit my orders," he said weakly. "All Thorics vessels." "Stand down." "Commander," his first officer asked, confused. "We end it," Vorthan said. "No more death. No more lies." And with that command, every ship in orbit powered down. The skies grew quiet. Humanity's enemies, their conquerors, their destroyers, had surrendered not to power but to a whisper. On Earth, silence filled the bunker. Halvorsen stared at the monitors, his voice barely a whisper. "He stopped the war," Elias nodded. "Not for us, for himself." Above, the Thoric's flagship released its final broadcast to the stars, a simple phrase, repeated endlessly in both alien and human language, "We remember." And then the lights of the once invincible fleet began to fade, one by one until the heavens were dark again. The whisper heard across the stars. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Across the galaxy, millions of listening stations, colonies, and alien outposts captured the same signal. "We remember." No commands, no threats. Just those two words, echoing through the void like a heartbeat that had finally returned after eons of stillness. On Earth, people stepped out of bunkers for the first time in months. The sky was filled with drifting wreckage and fading light. Children pointed upward. Old soldiers wept. The war that was supposed to end humanity had instead ended the empire that began it. Elias Rowe stood alone on the communications deck. The holographic screens around him still flickered with the last Thoric's transmissions. Images of surrender, chaos, emotion. Behind him, General Halvorsen entered quietly. "It's over," Halvorsen said, his voice rough. "They surrendered." "Every last ship." Elias didn't turn. "It's not over," he said softly. "It's beginning," Halvorsen frowned. "What do you mean?" Elias leaned on the console. "They weren't just invaders. They were fragments of us, what we might have become if we'd stripped away everything human." He looked up at the stars. "Now they remember what they lost. And that memory will spread. Across systems, across species. Because words don't die, General, they grow." Halvorsen crossed his arms. "You're saying they'll come back?" "Not as enemies," Elias replied. "As something else." In orbit, the Thoric's flagship drifted silently. Commander Vorthan was gone, vanished into the unknown after his final transmission. Some said he disintegrated with his ship. Others believed he fled into deep space to face the truth alone. But one thing was certain, his last act changed history. His surrender sparked what historians would later call the Whisper Revolution. Alien civilizations that once feared humanity began to question their own nature. The ancient warlords of the Kinneth stopped their planetary conquests overnight. The merciless traders of the Mir Collective opened peace channels for the first time in centuries. Every empire that had mocked human emotion, that saw compassion as weakness, now searched their own hearts for what they had lost. Earth's signal, Elias's whisper, had done something no superweapon ever could. It had made the universe feel weeks past. The stars were quiet again, but a different kind of quiet. The peace that follows revelation. In the ruins of the Thoric shipyard, scavengers found a single recording left behind by Vorthan. The message was simple, but its meaning shook the galaxy once more. We forgot what it meant to be alive. The human reminded us, guard that memory, for it is the only thing stronger than war. The broadcast spread like wildfire, playing in alien temples, mining colonies, and human schools alike. People began calling Elias the Whisperer, though he hated the name. He hadn't spoken for glory or power, only truth. But that truth had changed everything. One night, as Elias walked outside the bunker ruins, he looked up at the stars. His reflection shimmered faintly in the broken glass nearby. For the first time, he saw the faint mark of light under his skin, the same resonance that had awakened the Thorics. He touched it, realization dawning. The whisper hadn't come from him. It had come through him, a voice of something older, something human and cosmic all at once. A memory that belonged to everyone, buried deep, waiting for someone to listen. The wind carried faint echoes across the empty plains. "Remember," it seemed to say. Elias smiled sadly. "I will," he whispered back. In the distance, a single star flickered brighter than the rest. Then another, and another. Across the galaxy, lights began to glow again, not as weapons but as beacons. The war was over. The universe was listening. The whisper that made the aliens surrender was now part of every world, every mind, every breath, and somewhere, beyond the edges of known space, a faint human voice still drifted through the stars, carrying the words that had saved them all, soft, eternal, unstoppable. "We remember."